Welcome to the Multifamily Marketers Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Grillo, co-founder here at Resident 360. I'm also joined by my co-host, Caroline Mills, our Director of Digital Marketing. Caroline, how are you this afternoon?
I am doing great, and I'm excited. We got a special topic and an extra special person on with us today.
We do. Today's topic is strategic branding for multifamily properties. And I thought the best person to talk about this today was our creative director, Michael Hinde. He's been with us for a number of years. So Caroline decided that we need to bring this guy on the show, talk with him, ask him some questions. And I think this is really going to be a good episode for any developer out there, any marketing director out there that's listening that has new properties that they are developing or considering repositioning, any type of branding. This is the perfect episode for you. So with that said, let me introduce Michael Hinde, our creative director here at Resident 360. Michael, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. So are you all things design? So when you go about your day to day in your life, are you just looking at everything by how it looks and this is good design, this is bad design, this?
Yeah, extra eye on it. Do you see billboards and branding and you're like, oh, that's bad?
Yeah, it's something that's hard to turn off, right? Like once you get into it and you're always kind of looking around and sort of, taking that critical eye to things in your life. So, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad.
Is your wife do you ever stop thinking about creative?
Not really.
Are you when I'm a very person, my dad was an engineer in a house, if a picture frame is slightly off, he'd be the one to walk in and fix it or change it. Are you design eye in your own life?
I would not say I do that. I do that. I'm not I don't know. Things are in my own life, it can be pretty messy. Right. So
love that. You got to have the balance.
Yeah. There's definitely, it's funny because my wife, as far as decorating the house, she has a style that's she likes all these little things and little pictures and all this stuff, all this sentimental stuff. And I'm usually oh, there's so much stuff around here. I want it to look clean and nice. So there is that element to it, but no, I feel like I'm too busy to care whether a picture on the wall is crooked or not. I guess I would love everything to be straight, but it's just life moves too fast. I'd say for that.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump into it. The way Caroline and I did it, we just created some questions that we thought would be good for Michael. And this is all going to be short, sweet for everybody, all the listeners out there. So the takeaway is that you have a really good sense of what it is, what is branding for a multifamily property what makes good branding, what makes bad branding, that sort of thing. And as we pick the brain of our creative director here at Resident 360. So Michael, just to start, we say branding a lot, that word's thrown around a ton, but I'm a developer. I've got a brand new property I'm developing. What should be included in branding, right? If I have to go out to an agency and get a brand package, what do I really want? What do I really need? I guess is where we should start.
Right. So, at first I'd say, people always treat the brand like it's the logo, and they always, focus on these little things that are part of the brand and sometimes important parts of the brand. But the brand is a much bigger thing. And if you think of branding in general, it's really about the experience that your customer, in this case for multifamily, it's usually residents or prospective residents, has with your brand. So it's the way they think about it and the way they interact with it. So it's really this sort of wide swath of things that affect your brand. Specifically for us, when our clients come to us, they're looking to brand their community, speak to their clients. So what that entails is obviously there's a visual identity aspect to it. So there's the logo, there's the typography, there's the colors, there's textures and patterns and all these sort of brand elements that make up sort of the visual aspect of it. Plus, and then that kind of helps design these different touch points from, flyers to brochures to signage to billboards, anything like that is all informed by the visual identity. The other part of that is usually the messaging. The messaging is, usually we're using a copywriter to come up with a brand narrative. and taglines and headlines and stuff that, communicates to their residents or prospective residents about the community and what the community is all about. So, those two things primarily are what we are creating for our clients. And, it's a little bit broader than that, but if you want to break it down into like those sorts of pieces, that's generally what we're doing.
What about, now I know you do a lot of these mood boards. Like what role do they play in a brand? I mean, I think they look really awesome, right? You do a fantastic job on it, but what's the real purpose of a mood board?
Right. So a mood board is sort of like your visual research. So it's sort of inspiration. It helps us. I always do one, even if I wasn't going to present it to the client or make it part of the deliverables. It's just sort of like this, not really like a cheat sheet, but like this reference that we can have that we can always go back to and say, what were we thinking when we first, started this branding, when we were talking to them on the kickoff call and creating a creative brief, like how does that visually work itself out? And then as we get further down the line and we're into like round 3 of logo revisions, we have this reference to go back to and just make sure that we're kind of being true to our original vision. Not that it can't evolve in some way or another, but it, if it all of a sudden like things don't seem to be, jiving together, then you might be going way off track. So you just have to like rethink it a little bit. And then as a deliverable, when we put together brand guidelines, which is sort of like this thing that we give to our clients with all the different brand elements in it so that they can, shepherd the brand going forward. We include that mood board just as sort of a visual reference. And sometimes it for some clients, they kind of dive into it and they really like, picking apart the mood board and saying, maybe try something like this, or, that doesn't feel right. Other clients are just like, oh, that looks cool. And they move on. So, but
now, how helpful is it to you when you have a developer or a marketing manager come to you? Is it more helpful if they have some idea of what they want it to look like or how they want to start the process? Because it can be really overwhelming for them of deciding how to even go about this. Or is it more helpful if they come to you and just say, hey, this is the name of the property and it's up to you on how we go about this?
Yeah, I'd say it's mixed. I think that I do like it when developers have a good idea. They don't usually come with like a really full, fully evolved.
Like you don't need to know all of it, like your fonts and stuff.
But it does help. It definitely helps when they come knowing who they're trying to speak to, right? And understanding their demographic and stuff like that, which they, generally they should, because, by the time they come to us, they're in the process of building a building somewhere, right? And so hopefully they've done their research to know, that people are going to want to live here, right? They know the market enough to make that investment. And so they should have a good deal of understanding of that already. So if they can bring that, that's like the key. That's what we really need. And then if they have, an idea of what it might look like, then we definitely want to hear it. And it definitely informs, the way we move forward. So I like that. There are times, where, clients have something in their mind. They don't know exactly what it is, and it can be hard to like kind of get that out of them. And sometimes they're like committed to something that may not be the best solution, right? Like, an idea for a logo that maybe isn't their best option, and it's up to us. Obviously it's their decision in the end, but we try to sway them and lead them down a better path if we can.
Well, okay, here's a good one for you. Now, what in your mind separates, let's say, a good-looking property brand, one you're like, oh my God, this is an incredible brand, from one that actually drives leases?
Yeah, so I think the important thing is to, when you go out to do this branding is, again, to know your audience. So a good-looking brand, it may attract attention, it may look cool, but if it's not resonating with your audience, if it's not authentic to the property, then it's probably not going to perform very well.
Well, okay, stacking on top of that, then where would you say that most multifamily brands miss the mark visually?
So I'd say that they miss the mark visually by, really focusing on the logo as opposed to the entire brand as a whole. If they do that, then they kind of miss the bigger picture. And that, if they think of their logo as like the single expression of their brand, they try to like stuff it with all this stuff. It needs to communicate this and this and this. Then a lot of times it will just lead you down a path to something that's not that great. It doesn't work.
Which I can see that side of it, because the marketer's like, oh, I need to get ads out there. I need to get a GBP up. And so they're focused on, okay, if I have a logo and a name, I can get all this stuff going. But there's a lot more, as we're learning, that needs to go into the back of this besides physically just having the logo.
Yeah. And it is like, I think that understanding that in this industry, a logo is very important. And they do need it kind of upfront because of all the process of everything. But even beyond that, just the idea of what the logo is and understanding that it doesn't have to, if you're, a construction company, it doesn't have to have a building in it, certain things like that, it just doesn't have to do that. And it can, actually hurt you if you think that it does, because then you don't see the bigger picture. You're not. And then I also think they don't invest in it. Like they take that logo when it's done and they just slap it on stuff. Right. And they don't invest the time or the money or whatever to really roll that brand out in a way that's going to be effective.
Makes sense.
Especially for our communities, the brand can be part of the resident experience 3 years, 5 years down the road. So it's not just what it is right now. It's also how that works in a community for the next 5-6 years.
I like that. The long-term thinking.
Well, how do you prevent properties from all looking the same if they're in, crowded markets? Like how do you differentiate them?
Yeah. I mean, compare and contrast. That's your best way to go about it, doing your research and understanding what's around that area. It's important to carve out a unique position in the market. Sometimes it can be something that's very visual, like colors, typography. When they zag, you want to zag. But, also finding that story about the community that will help give it a unique personality. So you want to, find that thread of a story if you can. We had a client that came to us a while ago, and they had this property. It was in an area where there were lots of other communities around, and they kept referencing their main competitor. And it was one of these bigger companies, and they kept calling it cookie cutter. And so they didn't want to be cookie cutter. And they did a really good job when they made this property of just in the design of the property, that it did not feel cookie cutter. It definitely had a personality, and it made our job very easy. And then, the truth is, a lot of times these communities are very similar. Everybody has a pool, everybody has a fitness center, and they're across the street from each other. So the whole location thing. But in some cases, it's, that's why that research is important, to try to find that thread and try to create a personality for the brand. The other thing that you can do is sometimes you can, even if it's in the same area, you can take something and you can really lean into it more than all your other competitors, and you can really own it. We are working on a project right now for a client, and that's one of the sort of avenues that we put in front of them, is to say, yeah, there's other communities around, but if you really own this in your narrative and your story and your visual identity, that you can own it more than they can.
Like that.
That kind of leads me to my next question. So how do you handle clients who want safe instead of effective? Let's play it safe, Mike. We want it safe here versus effective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where this usually comes in most of the time, is when you talk about your audience. A lot of times these communities, they have a kind of a broader audience, so they're always sort of afraid to go in a certain direction, with the idea that, but we have this other demographic, we have these other clients that, may not be into that community if we go this way. Mm-hmm. And, I think it's always just talking them through that. I think an effective brand will always make some sort of commitment. I mean, it's a legitimate concern, when clients bring that up. You want to speak to all your audience. But I also think that it's important to make a commitment and, not be too safe, because, if you try to speak to everybody equally, then it's like you're speaking to no one.
Right.
All right. So what would then be your approach when a client is emotionally attached to bad ideas?
When they zig and you want to zag.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We know, you see all these logos. I'm like, I love that logo. And then the client's likes the worst one of all of them.
Yeah. Or like when the owner and the management company disagree on the worst logo.
So this, I mean, I think that's kind of like two different things, right? One is when they're emotionally attached to something that's not the best option. And I mean, all we can really do is, back up our argument, right? And kind of do the research and, try to talk them into a better solution. That's all you can really do. Show them options, try to convince them that, your way is better because of X, Y, and Z. What's even tougher, I think, is when your clients can't agree, right? And when they can't do that, yeah, it's tough. You just you get into those rooms, or those Zooms, and you try to just sort of mediate it, right? You be mediator, and you try to give your 2 cents, in that sort of diplomatic way that you can, and hope that you can lead them to not only agree, but agree on the better solution.
So stacking on top of that, how do you translate business goals into creative direction?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of goes back to that idea of, you need to make sure that your creative is speaking to the audience that you want to speak to, right? So if your business goal is to, lease up, then you have your audience and you just want to make sure that your creativity is speaking to that audience.
Talking about a lease up, do you have a time that you urge people to go ahead and have ideas or like start working on their brand? Like, what is the typical turn time you see of, this is when I present the ideas and we have our initial call to when it actually goes to fruition? And so you tell people, hey, I would give yourself 8 weeks, 10 weeks, to go through this process. How early should people be coming to you for brand advice?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the earlier the better. I mean, once you know where you're building your building, or your property, then you should start to think about it. And, the earlier you come to us, I'd say the better, even if we, kind of start and then at some point, it kind of like gets put on hold. That's okay. I mean, there's certain things that you need to know before you start your branding. We've had clients come to us, and we start working and they're like, oh, this might be a 55 plus community now. It's like, well, maybe you should figure that out first. But the earlier the better. Most of the time, I think, a lot of our clients are coming to us, I would say later, but I think that's just it's the kind of the industry because, where we have all these different stakeholders, you have the developers and the owners and, maybe a company that's doing the management and maybe they're doing the marketing. So a lot of times they're like pretty far on and before they get to us. I'm not sure if I could put a week, an actual timeline on it, but, I'd say expect your brand to take like a few months. I think that's the best thing to say.
All right, well, let's do this. This will be fun. So a little bit of a rapid fire. I got a couple questions. These should be fast, fun questions for you, Michael.
Okay.
Starting with, what's the most overrated design trend right now? Oh boy.
Ooh.
So I don't know about overrated, but I find this like overused. I think it's the Pinterest effect, but like really boutique looking visual identities, especially logos with very like detailed oriented typography. I think that's sort of a design trend, especially among designers right now. And when we work with designers, a lot of times, sometimes we'll get presented with stuff like that. And I got to be like, how is that going to work on a monument sign? It's just not, and I think it's just like a really hot sort of visual style right now.
All right. Next one. Best branding decision you've seen recently.
Okay. So I have a couple. I have one that is sort of a, you know, for us internally. And then I have one that's like some other brand. Decision to redesign the Westwood collection for R.W. Selby, one of our clients, I think was a really good brand decision for them. They have like 7-8 properties, I think, in the Westwood Village area, all related to UCLA. So very student oriented. They had sort of like a color, a shared color, some shared sort of typography, but it was really not very cohesive. And we were able to put together a brand that not only did it connect all the communities and they felt all cohesive, but it didn't put them in a box. Like it's a brand that has a lot of different ways to express itself. So for the different properties, they could do that at the same time that they all feel like a collection. So that I thought was a really good brand decision of theirs. And then outside of that, I was just looking, I always go to like these sites like Brand New and look at what's going on and the branding industry. And I thought Lazy Boy did a really good job with their rebrand recently.
All that one. Yeah.
They have, it was like this, I don't know, their logo is pretty dated. I don't know, it was like, I felt like a kind of 90s logo, and they updated. They went back to one of their more original logos that was a lot friendlier and more comfortable, and redid it as, in a modern form. And I thought they did a really good job at that.
I like that kind of the pull with the nostalgia. I followed that one and saw that redesign. I thought that was cool.
What about where do you get design inspiration from now?
I mean, all over the place. Online.
Are there some great sites out there where you can, you pull ideas down, you see ideas that we should share?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows about Pinterest. It's still a great place to search for inspiration, or even just like textures and stuff like that. There's another one that I look at, Design Inspiration, that's a little bit more design oriented, like put up by graphic designers. So it kind of like cuts through a lot of the other stuff that ends up on Pinterest, like, renovating your kitchen or something like that. It's all about, colors and typography and, stuff like that. And then, I mean, I don't know if I could list them all, but there's a lot of sites that look at visual identity and rebrands. Like Brand New is one that's very popular, and just there's just tons of really good design inspiration on those. Also, there's like stuff like ComArts magazine, print magazine, graphic design magazine that do their annuals, and a whole bunch of websites like the Webby Awards, W3, I think, also, that have a lot of inspiration for websites.
Right. All right. Back to my rapid fire questions really quick. Worst creative advice you hear in the industry?
Creative advice.
Worst creative advice. Let me guess. You don't need a logo. Do the logo. The logo for that property.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, any advice that says that, that sort of underestimates the importance of that part of it, the branding or the logo or anything, I think is probably pretty bad advice. I mean, I guess there's the things that it's not really advice, but like that clients want us to do. It's a cliche, but like make the logo bigger, or like they always want to fill in space. Nobody likes white space. And just like sometimes overloading stuff, I think, is I guess I would consider that bad advice, though I know that there's like sometimes there's a reason behind it. Yeah, that's what I would say.
All right. Last one. One thing every multifamily professional should understand about design.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that it takes a lot of work and thought and research. I think that a lot of times people look at branding and design in general and they say, oh, this person or this agency does, really good design, and that it's just some sort of like magic bullet. But the reality is that, the difference between, really good design or really good branding and not so good, is usually just the good branding or the good design, somebody was behind it saying, yeah, it's not good enough yet. It's not good enough yet. and just keeps working at it and spends the time to make it until it's better, as opposed to, somebody who's like, okay, we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it. All right. I think we'll wrap there. Caroline, any last questions for Michael Hinde before we wrap up the episode?
This was really good. I think one of the key things we're taking away, especially as like a marketing manager coming from the management side, is, know your audience and start as early as possible. I think that's the key takeaway. And so definitely, I think the earlier you think it's early, like it's still not early enough. So just start as soon as you can.
Awesome. All right, Michael, appreciate you coming on the show today. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the Multifamily Marketers Podcast. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Caroline. Take care, guys.
You too.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.